Welcome back. UCT Vice-Chancellor Professor Mamokgethi Phakeng has apologized unreservedly after co-hosting a controversial seminar titled, "What Does Science Say About LGBTQIA+." Panelist Dr Kgomotso Mathabe said transex people needed corrective surgery. It's caused outrage from activists, labeling it harmful and hurtful. In her apology, Professor Phakeng says she'll be engaging with the LGBTQIA+ community over the next 2 months. UCT spokesperson Elijah Moholola joins us now live. Elijah, thanks for your time. So an apology and engagement with the LGBTI community. That's it?
That's the start of the conversation and the necessary step that came as a result of that session, for which indeed Professor Phakeng has unreservedly apologized to the LGBTQIA community. So the starting point will be to engage with the affected community to try and really learn, to try and understand, to try and grow, and also to heal some of the hurt that resulted from that session. And as we go along, some of those sessions actually have started as soon as this week. And as we go along, out of those conversations, out of those engagements, she will be in a more enriched position going forward. One of the things, of course, that she has done in addition to that was to not organize any further LGBTQIT related sessions as part of her Sunday sessions on strength in diversity. So that's a whole range of things or measures that she's putting in place to try and deal with the aftermath of the unfortunate development as a result of that session, for which she again is deeply regretful over.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand this. She's having these sessions with members of the LGBTI community to do what exactly? And educate herself, or does she try to calm down how people feel after listening to that lecture?
So it's multifold. It's out of the recognition that her intention with the session on that particular Sunday, her intention was quite a good intention, but obviously going into it, she has since received this feedback which she needs to take on board, which she needs to use to almost aid her understanding of the method, to almost aid what she probably needed to have taken into consideration even as she organized the first or the initial lecture on that particular Sunday. So the intention is really to try and aid her understanding, but at the same time, it's also to try and heal, recognizing that as unintentional as it was, she has caused some pain, she has caused some hurt. Beyond apologizing, it calls for an engagement with the people that are directly affected or that directly felt this hurt and this pain, to try and really heal some of that hurt that has been caused.
Okay, is that enough to undo the misinformation plied to the homophobic, narrow-minded people in society who will use what they heard to carry out hate crimes and even mock the LGBTI community?
One of the things that is happening at this stage, Shahan, is that as soon as this was reported to Council, to the Chair of Council, UCT put in place a review panel. And what is significant to that component is that there is going to be LGBTQI representation in that panel. The panel will then look at the matter still in parallel with Professor Phakeng's own efforts in trying to heal the hurt and in trying to reach out to the LGBTQI community. There is this panel that is continuing with the work, and out of that, considering, of course, a whole lot of factors, a range of factors, such as, for instance, the umbrella of academic freedom under which the lecture happened, considering the whole range, the panel will look into the matter and then will determine what is UCT's position and what is it that as an institution would be UCT's take on this matter, and if there is any other further remedial step that can be taken. So at this stage, we're not necessarily able to delve into the what or the what not of the matter, but we do recognize that she has apologized. She is reaching out to the affected communities. She's trying to better herself, to equip herself, to recognize that she may have gone into that session with good intentions, but it didn't land as well as it should have. And she has that responsibility to reflect and deeply introspect and come to the position of saying, how do I then meet this affected community halfway?
I'm struggling to understand what good could have come out of discussion like this when the Vice-Chancellor actually thought about hosting this topic, because that title is actually problematic in itself. The science between the LGBTQIA plus community.
Sure. No, I'm sure certainly once we've had, because one of the things I'm trying to not necessarily do during this conversation is to try, in light of this ongoing or this pending work by the panel, one of the things that I'm trying to do is to try not be in a position where I almost pass judgment on whether it was wrong or right, but is to say that there's two things that are happening. There's the panel that might as well come to that conclusion to say, we have reviewed, they are going to look at the whole 1 hour, every aspect of it. The title, as we've mentioned, the contents, what the guest said during the session. And they are going to say, we feel out of this. These are our findings, these are our recommendations, and this should become UCT's position. It might as well be that they speak exactly to what you have raised, to say that we feel that the title was problematic. So we're going to give them that space to do the work. They have prioritized it. Our Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Transformation is leading that work. He already has put in place the panel that is ready to start work. And what I do need to point out is the significance, given that the session happened outside. One of the factors that was raised was that it happened outside representation of the LGBTQI community. The panel itself is going to make sure that it has that representation so that we come out of it with an enriched view, not with views that might feel like, some were left out.
Okay, so when you apologize for something, is this an apology? Does it not take into any form of wrongdoing then? Or are you just saying, I'm sorry that I offended you for what happened?
So Professor Phakeng has reflected on her part, has reflected on the session, has reflected on the reactions that came out of the session, both from the LGBTQI community as well as the general community. And we must, of course, acknowledge that the reactions have been varied. But that's neither here nor there, because she did not necessarily have to put on a scale to say there's this side of the reaction and that side. All she did was, after a couple of days since the session, she looked at it closely, she reflected deeply, and came to a position that I recognize that, unintentionally or not, I have hurt a certain section of the community, and I am going to apologize for that. So that is really what she is doing, irrespective even of waiting for the outcome of this review work. She's realizing that for the hurt that she has caused, she is deeply, deeply sorry. She's reaching out to the communities, and that really ties in with how her tenure has been since 2018. She's really been committed to transformation. She's been committed to diversity and to inclusivity. So it's really, to the university at least, did not come as much of a surprise that she came to that realization or that position of saying, let me apologize for the hurt that I have caused.
This is my problem. You say in your statement the apology came after some deep reflection on Phakeng's part since the session. What deep reflection is needed to actually happen here when it was clear that the expert chosen to speak was talking absolute nonsense? Were pre-interviews not done before these people were allowed to speak at such an event?
Shahan, when you invite a guest to any event, you do not invite them and almost dictate. Like I say, there's a whole range of factors that are at play here. One of it being the banner of academic freedom. When you invite or you identify a subject and you invite who you feel is necessarily the right person or the relevant person, maybe not necessarily right, but the relevant person to speak to a subject. You do that, they come on board and they have their say. It might be that you agree with what they say or you disagree, you are comfortable or you are not, but you wouldn't have necessarily have had the hindsight of knowing word for word what they are going to say. It might be that, for instance, immediately on Sunday, it might have been that after the session, Professor Phakeng might have felt some of the discomfort, some of the hurt, some of the statements come. If she had done that, she would have apologized even on Sunday. So you do not necessarily have a blueprint and say, you are our guest, you are going to speak to A, B, C, T, Z. In between that, something might come out that you do not necessarily have 100% 100% control over, which is why, and by the way, we are also talking a matter that is not necessarily as clear as black and white. There's some gray areas to it, there's some factors to it, which is why now the panel is going to look into it. It's going to help UCT come to a position, because as it stands, almost 8 days later, UCT does not have a position yet on this matter. We are going to be assisted by that panel, which is going to look at precisely some of the things that you are putting to us now during this conversation. The subject, the fact that could maybe it have been looked at better, the background of the speaker, which is what happens, by the way, all the time when we invite guest speakers. But at the end of the day, you cannot with certainty know that this person will say or not say what may or may not offend.
Well, I mean, you're talking about medical issues here, so I would imagine that you would get a urologist who would know exactly what is happening in a person's body and would not use the word corrective surgery, when we know very well that intersex people can live healthy lives without surgery at all. So the terminology and the background checks is what I'm talking about. I don't expect you to dictate to anyone who's speaking at the university what to say. But when you conduct your pre-interviews, you expect these medical professionals to be talking facts and not using words that could lead to hate crimes in this country.
Sure, certainly. So there are two things again, is that the work of the review panel will be necessarily to delve into that. That's the one thing. But the second thing as well is that as an aftermath or as an after development since that session, the academic herself has come out, and once she has explained herself, I wouldn't be necessarily in a position to explain herself for herself as I sit here. But she has explained herself, and crucially as well, she has apologized. She has explained that the intention was certainly not to cause any hurt. The intention was not to cause any harm. But if that was how it was perceived, she has also apologized. And of course, I cannot necessarily, because she's not an internal UCT person, I am speaking on behalf of the institution, I cannot necessarily speak for her. But what I do know is it's public record. She has also apologized, and she can most likely be also keen to speak to specific aspects of what came out of her discussion with Professor Phakeng.
Why is she not speaking to the media? Because when she was appointed Vice-Chancellor, UCT went on a big campaign getting media interviews for the Vice-Chancellor, but now I'm told she's not doing any interviews.
You've probably not been told correctly, Shahan. She was on ENCA last week, the week before last, and the other week. 3 times in the past 3 weeks.
After
she was
the lecture?
on ENCA, she was on any... no, not after the lecture.
That's what I'm talking about. Come on, dude. No.
Oh, cool.
Let's not take things out of context. I'm talking about her not coming on to do an interview after this controversy. Not about Shahan, the past. That means nothing.
Shahan, if you want her to come on to ENCA on any programming, your guys who got me to came on knows exactly how to get her to come on, Shahan. You will come to us, put in the request, and we will bring her to be interviewed by ENCA, whether in this show, whether on any other show. We will always bring, I mean, she's the most accessible VC in the country, at least from what we see from our media monitoring agencies. She's been all over. So you will definitely, if you are keen, you will get to have an interview and a conversation with her on this. It might be that, as is the case with any ongoing matter, she might say, I may not necessarily be able to come onto ENCA tomorrow because there is the work of the review, which she cannot go public and almost try to influence, because whatever she says now obviously might have a bearing on the outcome of this review work that is going on. So it might be that, or it might be that she's keen, but what I can assure you is that Professor Phakeng has been keen, has been available for any media, Shahan.
She hasn't been available this week or last week because my team has tried to get her to speak to us about this session, and I was told that she's not doing any interviews. Today, though, we got you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shahan. I can assure you Professor Phakeng is available and the team knows how to reach her through me.
I'll try again next week, okay? That was UCTV's spokesperson, Elijah Moholola.